Everyone's taking some time out of their day on a Thursday. Some of you probably are hopefully having some lunch during this call to learn more on tanks and silos and Plex.
All right, let's go. It's 2 after. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to this webinar on the overview of tank and silo management in the Plex manufacturing clouds. My name is Josh Long. I'm the ERP consulting manager here at Revolution Group, and Emily is going to be giving the presentation. But first, let's start with the agenda. Emily, can you go to the next slide for me? We work through these technical difficulties. Today's agenda, we're going to start out with a very short introduction to Revolution Group, some comments on automation, fair demonstrations, and presentations coming up. And then Emily will take us through the overview of the tank and silo management, and we'll end with, of course, a thank you and some contacts with Emily and our sales team if you would like more information. So let's start out with who Revolution Group is. We primarily offer technology services through 2 divisions, one being our technology service. Can you hear me now, Emily?
Yeah, sorry, technical issue.
We're having an issue with the mute button on the webinar, so apologize for that. So again, who Revolution Group is? Revolution Group, we assist clients through 2 divisions, one being our technology services group, who does IT managed services and strategies. And of course, the second group is our ERP manufacturing services, what brings everyone here today, where we focus on ERP and MES selections, deployments, and optimizations, and particularly around the Plex manufacturing cloud. So next slide, please, Emily. We've been a partner of Plex for over 20 years with about 18 Plex consultants, developers, and associates focused on the Plex manufacturing cloud with over 100 plus implementations, and we're proud to be one of the first Plex partner. Next slide, please. Our service focus through our ERP practice is among 3 areas. One being application implementation. That's the implementation of Plex ERP solution, MES, a QMS solution, the quality tools. We also offer integration and development services. We work with many clients who are integrating Plex to other legacy systems, ERP systems, or CRM systems like Salesforce, or even down into production with integrations with Sigma Nest or ADP for user management. On top of the integration development, we also focus on custom development within the Plex application, working with clients to develop Vision Plex reports and applications, or IntelliPlex dashboards and reporting. And then we'll provide some contact information at the end of this call if you would like more information on our services. Next slide, please. We, of course, do this with our partners. We are a proud gold system integrator partner with Rockwell Automation and Plex, but we also have other implementation partners. If it's selling their warehouse management tools, or it could be Configure One if we're working with clients to engineering no order solutions, along with general data from a hardware standpoint. So we are proud of these partnerships, and they continue to allow us to assist clients with more than just the implementation of the Plex manufacturing cloud. Next slide. Real fast, one of those partners is Logistics Systems, LSI. And we are proud to be partnering with them this year at Automation Fair in booth 302 and 304. We're going to be neighbors there in Anaheim. If you are attending Automation Fair, we encourage you to come by the LSI and the Revolution Group booth, where you're going to be able to see a demo of some of our integration work, particularly around how Plex's Rockwell's batch, FactoryTalk batch integrates with Plex MES, along with using FactoryTalk optics as an edge connectivity tool to allow those connectivities to happen. This demonstration is going to focus on these 4 key areas of this integration, being able to demonstrate what the operator and manufacturing view of the HMI will look like, how things synchronize between the two systems, with a goal of improving quality management and track and trace for batch operations. So again, booth 302 and 304, and that's next month in Anaheim at Automation Fair. All right, Emily. So I think the next slide is our table and contents. So with that, we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes with Emily. I want to welcome Emily Tomaine. She's a consultant with us here at Plex and Revolution Group. Getting ahead of myself. Today we're going to be covering take and silo management. She's going to be walking you through this demonstration. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring those. Go ahead and just let those questions fly as you have them, and myself and Emily do the best to answer them and respond as soon as possible. So Emily, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. So Emily Tomaine, Revolution Group. Some of you may know me. I recognize some of your names on there. Some of you work closely with. I will be presenting this year. I'll be at the booth in Anaheim for the demo that you'll see with the factory batch, with the integration with Plex, which ties in nicely with the tank and silo management that we are here to talk about today, and some of that APIs that it has, how it integrates with Mach 2, future potential, and just the Plex functionality. And with that, with Automation Fair, before we jump in the table of contents here, just to call out, besides stopping down at the booth, feel free to sign up for, the slide is hidden, sorry about that, for a presentation be doing with More Than a Bakery, Richmond Bakery, and Portland Bottling Company on pretty much everything quality management system and how you can move towards quality 4.0, leveraging Plex and visualizing your quality data and hearing those customers share their use case stories and how they have empowered their business to take some things that you would analyze after the fact down to the floor to be more proactive than reactive in your processes. And with that today, Josh, thank you very much for all the introductions on everything that we do here as a partner with Plex and our longstanding history, and that nice introduction for myself. Appreciate it. So part of the topics here today, for some of you that may not have known, the tank and silo management has rolled out only about 3 weeks ago now. Very fresh rollout and very new functionality feature. It's been part of an item, been involved in some of the discussion with the functionality here at Rev Group on some of the voices of your customers that you funnel to us and how you voice that to Plex Rockwell. So with that, we're going to talk about just why is tank and silo management important? Why are some of you here today listening to us? Where in Plex does this new functionality interact in the system? And what does that mean to part of your process for streamlining your inventory? And most importantly, like my background before Revolution Group, as quality and quality operations. So why is that important to traceability? And what does that mean for you for compliance and regulatory needs? And then talking about that, some of those API advantages, not just inside Plex, what it does, like when we receive something and that automatic tracing, but then maybe like a use case process of envisioning what you do day in and day out of your sites and how that can carry through. That's where I went. Slide wasn't hidden, it was in the wrong order. So that's just our CV28, empowering operators at Portland Bottling and More Than Bakery for real-time data collection and actionable insights. If you are going to Anaheim, it's right near Disneyland. So stop by, come see our story, and stop down by the booth. So with this is just one of the slides from the original release from Rockwell that they released regarding this opportunity. It's a great visual, right? Plant 4 and all the piping, everything that you might have. And it's just to start talking about why is it important. So when we're talking about that tank and silo, what is your pain point today, typically? So some of you on the call that we personally recognize, right, and all of you here, you're probably in your day-to-day world in Plex, when you have a tank or a silo and you have multiple lots in it, where you are adding on top of it and you're depleting from it. Plex, previously until this module release with lot management, when you're using Plex UX lot management, you would only be able to have one lot assigned per container, per location. And now this allows you to have inside these silos this multiple lot process. And they've included a more streamlined process for our food and beverage industry or other process-based industries that leverage lot management. So really, what are the main goals, right? The focus. So high level, why was this an initiative? And some of you may ask, why did it take so long, right? Because some of you, we've been on implementations for you going into Plex and knowing that container management process that you use today on how to merge your lots together inside of a tank. That then gives you a little bit trickier process in that traceability, where you are having a little bit larger window to date to be able to truly track that FIFO process in the system, since you are merging containers together of lots versus having a true, when you added a container, created a container of a specific lot and started depleting that in the system, based on FIFO, first in, first out. So that traceability now has been increased in a granular ability for our process food and beverage industries, which then enhances that ability to identify when you need to go into the data, go into the records, to go look and say, troubleshoot an item. Maybe it is, with the benefit of this module, we're going to have sanitation event codes that can be entered for when you clean out a tank or a silo. And why that's important in this system is to tell the system when there's always potential residual, unless you zero out a container, it would zero out that remaining inventory in your tank or silo, and it would create that break in your traceability for you. So your quality teams, when you need to do some type of trace internally or some event review, or even for, let's say never happens, but a larger event, you have that more granular ability to finally trace from the time a receipt of a tanker or some item that goes into a silo all the way through your processes is fully traced granularly and reduces that risk of issues. And it's just an example here of, for some of you that just need a refresher on the process. So when we talk about lot tracing and why it's so important, we talk about forward tracing, we talk about backwards tracing. The backwards tracing, right, is when we start to go look backwards in a process. So somewhere you have, maybe it's a finished good, and we want to trace back what was used in that carton, that bottle, that can. And maybe we found out from a supplier, right? Supplier had a recall. There was too high metal in some ingredient. And now you got notified, and we need to go through the exercise of tracing it. That happened to be a large volume item that you put into a silo. You're tracing multiple lots, and maybe even you have got such a high volume that that silo, maybe you have multiple suppliers that go into that same silo in a day. And in that silo, to track that, you need to now find really what could be that impact for you and your products, right? That could have a risk. And when you're doing that investigation, now this will give you that granular ability to be able to trace from the time you entered that record in the system of that container and that depletion to be able to fully chase it through. And that's just talking about the forward process. So we talk about a use case story, right? We just shared about a finished good carton. But if we step backwards to say a batching moment, and instead of at the silo, but at a tank, and you're blending a batch, and then it goes into some other processing, you can then transfer it to another tank area, and then go through whatever additional blending and processing you need before it goes into the bottom here. Wish I had a markup ability, but the two yellow circles at the bottom, like the pack outs at FP1 and FP2. And you can just follow through the process and know really down to the minutes in the system of depletion, really how much product that is. And then you'd be able to physically widen your window of time for that traceability exercise based on your procedures and processes. So really, what is tank and silo management? We've been talking about it. So we just focused on the traceability piece. One of really the bulk of the module is about tank transactions and logs in the system. And it's just a great tool that we'll see that will track through different areas of the process when it's assigned and configured for tanks and silos, areas that will show transactions. That can be when you receive a container into a silo, created a container like a new batch, when you did move transactions, when you depleted anything. And that talks about the streamline of moving inventory from tanks. There's a moving inventory from tanks. And some of you that are in the process world, but maybe not just food and beverage, what's really nice about the movement from tanks is a functionality of the shared source that's on the control panel. Is now they've added a functionality just like shared source, that's shared tanks. Based on configuration, we use functionality for shared tank. And what that does based on the tank configuration logic, the tank or silo can only have the same ingredient in it. So this is cool for like some other industries like injection molding, where and inside beverage or food, like if you have a wheat silo or a juice silo. My last job, we did a lot of different products from juice, oat milk, different almond milk, and we had different products, and we change silos pretty oftenly. And how do you track that you have the right silo? You're putting the product in the right silo. Relying on really people and people management. Well, part of the system now with identifying as a take or silo can, if it's registered as having wheat in it, and you try to go add barley into it, it's going to say no, it has wheat, and you can't do it. Or for any other example. So that's one nice advantage. But for like injection molding, you're going from a clear to like a recycled resin for that container location. And then we talk about the lot tracing, and then we're really moving into that where they're really focused on A&O. So this whole project and the mini pod that Plex rolled out for this was focused all on A&O. So the orchestration on APIs and the integration ability, because even in Plex where you do the functionalities, there's manual processes, and then there's just, you do the process in the system, and Plex will track it and put these in the reports for you, like the tank and silo log. So when we talk about the new tank and silo log, what's really nice is a timestamp for each introduction of a tank or an item that you can easily trace inside that tank versus having to go into the container traceability like you're used to in the past. Now we have essentially a tank traceability that is kind of one step up from a container, right? It's what has passed through this tank, which is a really nice function for the food and beverage industry. And we'll go through and show that. So in here, this is a tank and silo log. If this module is enabled for you, you're using lot management. And this is the area where, let's say we received an item through received part screen or received multiple parts screen. And now based on what we have, you can have like this event type, receive from supplier, receive raw wheat, your lot number, and inside here, it'll automatically track that for you and tell you that if you see over on the right-hand side, it's system generated. That means that through that received part, received multiple part, it created it. However, if I went into Plex and showed you outside of this PowerPoint, right, we would be able to go in and this material inbound event drop down in the blue action bar, be able to pick and add your type of event that you're doing if you need to do a manual event, but it's designed with those APIs to be able to connect through the system. So it's one nice advantage to be able to have the tracking and tracing for you. And then what's really nice is, and what I'm excited to see, it's like some of the integration potential is the tank and sanitation event. So you heard me mention my background's been quality. I've overseen all of sanitation, fully responsible for it across sites and multiple sites. And so have a strong interest in that area. And the tank and sanitation event's really cool for being able to, if you see in the PowerPoint, there's a column for sanitation codes. So you can define whatever your type of sanitation is. Is it a clean out? However you want to define it. It's like beverage, 5-step, 3-step, cold rinse, hot rinse, etc. And clean out, a washout, a COP, a CIP, whatever you want to call those. And you can create the trigger events to say when you did that. And this is where you would create that sanitation event and to say we did that washout. And what that does is if you pick silo 1 as an example, it would clear out the inventory that's remaining in that silo and retire it. And it would then, what that means is there's a clean break in that tank silo for traceability. And then when you start fresh adding a new container in, you can start fresh in a line of tracing product that would interact with each other across lots. So that's one nice benefit. What I have asked, and like our friends at LSI, is like, wow, how can we use that? What can we do next with it? And that's where there's APIs and there's integration points for that. So instead of us going into Plex and manually clicking and having an operator technician, when they're done with their CIP, creating that sanitation event to track that, is maybe using factory batch, maybe using some other system, some other type of PLC. And you can, when that CIP is complete, the CIP sends a signal from the PLC that says CIP done, recipe complete. And maybe that recipe, let's say, is a 5-step CIP. And that signal goes to Plex and it identifies that sanitation code and creates that. And that's something I'm hoping to see in the future for some of the customers looking to more automate and track that process where it's critical for you, and a nice place to have a one report view to track and identify all of that, along with what's really cool for me, being in the compliance regulatory world. This is a great report now where you have one place of visualization, if you have that automation, to be able to then track your frequencies of cleaning and how compliant are you on your frequencies of cleaning. And I know, like for myself, we're always compliant, right? We're always on time. But if you ever need to look at the data just to check and help give information to the team to be more effective, or to see if there is a problem spot, that could be a really cool tool. It just shows the tank log. Talks about these are really the 4 areas you're adding, receiving. There's a move inventory. So there is a screen for moving from tank to tank. We talked about receive part, receive multiple. Well, then there's a move tank functionality. So just like a move container, think of it, now there's a move tank from tank. And that's the same thing where if Emily goes to move silo flour in the system and then tries to move it to the silo B, the silo B has not flour in it, it's going to say, no, you're not supposed to move that and transfer that product. So as long as we check that beforehand in the system, before physically doing that, that can be a nice process catch for you and the team to identify and reduce some potential areas and help the team be empowered. And loading inventory, talk about that in the control panel. Talk about when you turn that on, you'll see just like load source, be a load tank. And then the recording production, you can record production into a tank. And that could be something like when we see this gentleman there in the hard hat for the record production, talked about that sanitation code and the integration. Well, like what if factory batch or some system like that that you use to record batch production, what if you took that and integrated it to Plex, where now maybe you have recipe management in Plex with your master items that push to your recipe system. And then through that process, maybe that even checks in with the inventory in Plex for what lot is being used, and then puts that into that batch recipe mixing system. And then at the end of the recording, send back to Plex to say how much was used of that lot and item, and that we're complete, and can send that back to Plex and say what tank that's completed from. And then maybe you then, once it's complete, move that to the next tank or blending area for production. So it's just an example screen at that receive area. All it will be is your location will be defined. What your location that you'll be loading into needs to be set up or flagged for your tank silo based on the configuration setup. And if you had that mix, like I mentioned, it would just not allow you to place it in. And then there's also, based on configuration, you can have some status control on that as well before you be able to load it in if needed. So there's a little bit of configuration review. And then that just shows once you receive it, that it creates the actual log automatically, and it says it's system generated. Just skip through and go into the sanitation events that talked about. Really, just to reiterate, why is it important? That traceability reset, so you can look at the tank, that clear break, and that nice advantage of retiring inventory so that your teams can reduce one of those clicks of going in and retiring one or maybe more than one piece of inventory in that associated tank, and be able to do that with less clicks a little quicker while having that traceability inside your tank and system. This is just an example of some of the codes. Example of the module, it would be located under the inventory control area once it would be turned on. And you see, it's It's quite lean, quite simple, and it's more where else does it impact around the modules or receive part, your control panel, record production. Also for when you do cycle counts as well, there's a difference in cycle counts. There's an example of like clean out, press out, whatever your processes are that you need, you can create those. You notice here, like just to point out, where we talked about the receive process, now we see this is one for sanitation code. So once you enter that sanitation event, it says in here, because it was a clean out, it reset the lot trace with the checkbox, and that we now have that record of time, and it's associated to a specific tank. In this case, that's in the second left column there for raw wheat. But like we mentioned, there's also the manual process, right? So if you receive a part, maybe we need to go in and the received quantity was incorrect. Emily here typoed something and her supervisor realizes there's a mistake. That's one of the places where you'd be able to go in there and make that adjustment for the quantity for those entries. You can void ones, like if it was a wrong sanitation event, you can undo those transactions just like if you need. And that's all can be based on some security actions, who has that ability to do those functions and who does not. Like maybe you don't want Emily, the technician operator, to be doing that functionality, but you want somebody else, the supervisor, leads, managers, to be able to have some of those like void processes. Just to talk about lot trace, right? So where we really go through this before we pop into looking at Plex on the couple screens is the biggest thing that's a win for you and the teams is the mix lots in your tanks. So that's the biggest goal across all of the items that you have with that accurate traceability. So that's why that's sitting there. And to talk about, these are the few main new APIs that they created around this module, along with other existing APIs that have been already existed around lot management, recording production, updating containers, around that control panel record production. So that the move container API had to be updated to allow for specific tank management process, the tank sanitation for the codes, and that inventory receipt process, that's new to be able to push that back. So that can be integrated to other places outside of just Plex into the tank and module. And then some of the lot manipulation, they've made some multiple APIs around things that you need to do around lot management and lot processes. So they've grown some of those APIs in those areas as part of the focus of this project. And those use cases, right? We talked about receiving a silo where you have tankers and that ability with that receive receipts. We talked about what about if you had at your PLC batching or some process, you're moving product from tank to tank, and then you have to move it when they physically move it on your PLC in the system, you then go to Plex and do it. What if there is a communication channel there? Now there'll be ability to do that if you so work to integrate. And then what if you had some system for recipes and you send that bit of information back to Plex to say CIP complete and create that record in Plex as well to track. Those are just some benefits. And then this is about the moving in. This is all around like control panel and inventory functions, right? Focused on receiving and quality. and now moving inventory. So that move from tank is going to be a screen that a lot of people just sit on and use, and we'll just load the quantity and move from tank to tank. The loading inventory will show that on the control panel, and bulk shipping, if needed, is a functionality that is coming out as a phase 2 process. We won't be showing that today, but they are working on rolling that out. And then just as a reminder, before we jump over into Plex to look at the screen, part of this demo webinar, be able to reach out to myself, have my emails there, paste it into the chat, and also Molly Haynes, our ERP strategy coordinator. She is the great go-to source for everything. She's fantastic. Quite a few that are on the call know her. She handles a lot of our established base for clients, help with project needs and supports. And then my role is more helping you on the technical side and helping doing things like this of sharing some of the new functionality in Plex. And then don't forget, during the process, feel free to ask any questions down here at the bottom. So I switched over into our one PCN, and this is in the module, right? It's turned on, there's tank and silo management here. And we see there's tank and silo log, there's sanitation codes, and that move from tank. That's primarily what there is. And then the security actions, and there's no permissions, just security actions associated to the security around this area that you would need to build out to your roles. And then tank and silo. What's really nice in here is like tank and silo 1. And you'll see there's a couple events here where we see like a receive from supplier, and there a sanitize event that was for clean out. And you'll see some of the tracking there. And you can filter it by dates. You can filter by sanitize, receive, any of those production are on the control panel, that moving a product. If you need to create inventory where it's not a receive from supplier, like where you're creating it from your inventory screen, you're adding it outside of that normal receive process, that's an inventory create. And then that receive from customer, like receive from part or something screen, you'll be able to track all of those events, and you'll be able to be able to do those manual events, be able to pick that type. You'd be able to pick your tank. Pick your part number, pick that lot number. If it needs to be created previously, you still follow the same process using lot maintenance. You can assign any type of notes if needed. Be able to generate that. Or you can do that through the receive process, which then would associate the serial number and all the associated details through the system generated process. Tank sanitation events, you'd be able to through here, unless you're using some of that API to make it further automated. This is where you create that the sanitation to say to Plex, we did a CIP in the system to that tank or silo. Maybe we're doing it to this batch tank. Maybe it's during the week and it's like between a product. You do this like 3-step. You can set the date and time to be quite as accurate as you need to physical completion time, and be able to add that in there. And now we don't see that because they don't have it filtered. for the batch tank, filter for the batch tank. You see there's quite a bit more transactions in here, that data. And then same thing for, if we go to the move from tank or silo, what I want to show is at silo 1, we have EFG, our sugar. And we want to move it to another location, but if we are not able to move it to another location due to a conflict, move it to silo 2. We click apply, you can make that transfer and it'll take it. If, based on what you have in inventory in that silo, and you have a different product, it will error out and not allow you to transfer. And then let's see if we go to the control panel to show the tank process. Control panel where you would see a few things. Biggest place you're going to notice something different under record production. This is a variable batch bomb setup and setup for batching. And when we go to load source, you will see right now we just don't have one loaded to the approved tank for this one, is the tank source inventory. So it's very similar to the source inventory, but it's dedicated to the tank based on the flag for the location that it's a tank or silo. To show that setup, it is under locations. There's some configuration around location types that's needed. Let's just say I pick silo. And there's this flag here for tank or silo. Once the module is enabled and another configuration, you'll see this tank and silo option, and that needs to be assigned. And it would need to be within a location type that's set up to be a storage type. And then that's what gives that ability to show up on the control panel as that shared source. And just like in shared source, you can, for each of your work centers, you can assign the tank to the work center. So you see, like I have silo 1 assigned to, and 2 assigned to these 2 work centers. So that's part of, just like shared source, how you would set it up is how you can set up for the tank, for as many tanks as you can allow, or as few tanks as needed per type of ingredient to those work centers to help set up those controls. And one of the other areas is cycle counting. And I can the cycle counts. The other areas impacted with the change is inside cycle counts here. And if we go to tank and silo in the blue action bar, which again, you may want to secure through the security actions, instead of where you're used to just going with add, in the past to create that cycle count, you can now trigger cycle counts for a tank and go through the process just as you're used to for a location. Now you can set up the same parameters and processes for a tank based on that location, or even if it's a location type that's specific to a silo. And that's for everything for the functionality and features. That's the gist of the process, why it's important. And like, think about the processes of how can this process, which you've seen as a few screens, it impacts receiving, impacts cycle counting, and the control panel for record production around work centers with some setup. That's not a lot of effort. That you, where can you benefit in your business today? And then on the next step, like for my favorite, that sanitation codes. To go back to sanitation and the logs. Would something like a future integration where you work where with that API to trigger from one of your PLCs for when a CIP is complete or a rinse, and start being able to track and trend that more effectively? And what does that mean for your customer data? What does that mean for your auditing and compliance? And then just internally for tracking and trending to be better in your processes overall. With that, just turn that into, for anyone that wants to put any questions, start answering. So and thank you for the question. Is there any tank silo capacity functionality? That's a great question. There is not currently. And I know that came up with our partner LSI asking me about that, of like, how can you control that limit to capacity, especially in a silo, right, where that limit is important, or maybe when it's low, that draw, when you're drawing product, and maybe that draw to a batching or a blending, and you're measuring with like a mass density meter by flow, can impact because you got air gaps in the pipe. So controlling that limit range is important. Currently, it's not a process in the system, but how can you work with one of those integrators and part of that where the PLC can control that and then send that information of inventory volumes back to Plex. And then can I set the work center capacity as a volume instead of time? Good question. The work center as a like run rate, those are based on more of a time, the run rate versus a capacity, like in capacity system. There is some potential functionality in the other application of finite that does lean into understanding around the batch and control. And actually Rockwell is working on a new finite application that is focused around batch capacity limitations. But right now, the limitation would be around the restrictions around your batch management. So you saw on the control panel that I had up, for some of you that are using UX, one of them, besides variable BOM that you see down here at the right, where you see green and reds, we see this batch info, and we see it says batch 101 right now. So you can set batches, and inside that, you can set, when the jobs are scheduling batches, what's the lowest for the batch and what's the highest of a batch. We don't have it for other areas, only tied into the production area right now for Plex. If anyone else has any questions, feel free. Well, while everyone's thinking through the process, I hope you all learned something that's a takeaway out of this time. Hopefully some of you enjoyed a break in your day on this Thursday, possibly had some lunch during this call, this webinar, and you can take something back to your teams, whether it's leadership, quality, operations, your IT teams, whoever's listening in, and just realize this is something that can it benefit you, and is it something you want to roll out to give that type of traceability improvement, and can it reduce some of the work for your teams that you're doing today for multiple lots in a tank management? Can it reduce pain points, such as giving you that control, not just in food and beverage, but process manufacturers, injection molding of some tank, some location, some bin that you want to make sure it's some type of, it's always component A, why it's flagged as A, and we don't mix B in it. I can talk my experience for like ejection story that impacts into downtime that we thought was something pretty exciting is some part of my, we had a line that would switch pretty often between customers, and we switched often from resin and recycling PET blow molding, and we would get during that time frame, we typically threw out the resin that we would get would sometimes be blended inside those totes. So like, how does that go back to the supplier who's trying their best to ensure the clean out of their process changes that were coming through, and then resulting sometimes in a few hours of downtime impact to our processing line for what we were making. So how can you put some type of control that may not seem like a big deal, but might equate to hours of time? So just want to thank you all for your time. I'm going to put into the chat just my email and Molly's email. And again, appreciate all of you for your time, willingness to listen in and learn something new, functionality in Plex, and how that can benefit your business. With that, it's in the chat. If any of you want to grab our contacts, feel free to email with any questions. I'm always glad to help. My passion is quality and also Plex. And then I hope to see some of you at the booth in Anaheim or in our talk, CV28 with More Than a Bakery and Portland Bottling Company. Thank you all for your time.
All right, thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Hope you have a wonderful day and the rest of your evening.